In this Q&A video, I'm going to be addressing a question from a lady who's doing a postdoc in South Africa. The question relates to quality versus quantity in the postdoc phase. And she mentioned some of the challenges that they are facing in terms of the number of publications they are expected to put out every year and how this is linked sometimes to the extension of contracts or getting a permanent contract at the end of the postdoc phase. I will read the last part of her question and then address it accordingly. So in summary, we find ourselves in a space where we don't have the luxury to pursue quality. The AI rush has led to some people publishing dozens of papers in a few months, and this only increases the pressure on us. My questions in all of this are: 1, am I better off having multiple publications in obscure journals, or, say, 2 quality publications in good journals? On the question of quality versus quantity in academic publishing, we have to start by acknowledging that there has been increasing pressure on early career researchers. So the expectations are set high before one even enters academia now, and they are set higher once they're in the early stages of their career. I have seen quite a few adverts, for example, that look for PhD students, and one of the requirements is that one should already have a track record in publishing. So how do you get a track record in publishing having not obtained a PhD? There is also the issue that there's less time awarded to do things, so PhDs themselves take less time, whereas still the expectation is that there will be more output coming out. So there's something that's systemic in itself that makes it really difficult to navigate this challenge and get this balance. I will also, though, acknowledge that we do have prolific writers. So there are people who are able to churn out a decent number of papers in a given year. But I will say that these examples of dozens of papers in a few months, those are the ones that I will think are suspicious, because even the most prolific of writers are not going to be churning out 1 paper per day or something like that. So in terms of what you do in this type of situation, so I think it's not an either or question. It's a question of you are in a landscape where things are very difficult. Expectations probably are not that realistic, and you probably still want to not compromise yourself in the process. So I'm going to go through some of the things that I think are helpful in terms of navigating this challenge and striking that balance between the quality versus quantity discussion. You could churn out a few more papers and you could still ensure that they are good quality through adopting some of these approaches. The first bit of advice that I would give is that always think about mobility. So it's easy to be absorbed in the current job and its demands, but always try to explore what in general your field, the trends are and what they consider important. So it could be that you're in an institution right now that thinks that the number of publications is important, but then later on, it could turn out that more generally in the field, there's more interest in the quality of output, and that they will embrace someone with a few good quality papers versus somebody with a large number of papers. So think more broadly about this and then try to use that to guide your own strategies or decision-making in relation to that. A second thing that I have found to be very helpful is finding institutional allies. These are the people that can support you in your efforts to ensure that you protect the quality of your work. Sometimes that means giving them a glimpse into your work, have them look at your work in progress, get feedback from them, and then they might understand why you are taking so long to get your work out. I would also say on the question of allies, it's sometimes good to find allies that don't look like you. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we tend to be drawn to people who are like us, whether it's along gender dimensions or racial dimensions or anything else that we might find more comfortable and familiar. And while those people can be very helpful in terms of relating to the nature of challenges that we have got, sometimes they are stuck in the same boat as us. So if we are facing challenges that limit us based on whatever profile we have, and we find allies who will be stuck in the same boat as us, they are not in the spaces where they can represent us and they can speak on our behalf. So try to diversify your ally pool and think about what advantages other groups have that can be helpful for you as you try to build a case for yourself in protecting the quality of your work. Something that's also good to think about is having a pipeline for yourself. So create an overview of all the papers that you could produce. And this could be based on things done from as early as your master's thesis dissertation phase. If you had some good quality data that you collected and that can be converted into a paper, this is part of your pipeline. If there are certain things in your PhD that you didn't have space to write or document as part of the PhD thesis process, this is part of your pipeline. Then once you have this pipeline, work strategically to get things out. With these, there are two things that I find helpful. So the first is thinking about the order in which you're going to release those papers. I've developed a system, for example, where I have what I call my main projects. These are the ones that I'm focusing on right now. I have what I call back burner projects. So these are the ones that I pick up occasionally if, let's say, for example, a main project is under review or a collaborator has to look at it. And then I have projects in the parking lot. These are the ones that I am waiting for the first opportunity to pick up and start working on. So keeping that steady flow of work in progress is going to help with the explosion of your publications at a certain point. And then another thing that you could also consider is think about what is the low-hanging fruit, what is the stuff that you could easily get out. And whether it's of high quality or rigorous doesn't really matter. Sometimes it could be that you discovered a method that could be useful for other people. So you publish a methods paper in a journal that focuses on methods. It's not going to take much effort on your part, but it's going to help you with your publication counter. And then you try to make sure that the work that you think is most valuable, you spend the necessary amount of time on. Another helpful thing when it comes to the quality versus quantity dilemma is to consider collaborations. If you work with other people, you will be able to get more work out and you might be able to still preserve the quality of your work. So who do you collaborate with? The things that I have found most important is to make sure that you have the same interests in terms of priorities. It's usually tempting to look up the big names in your field and you ask these busy professors to collaborate with you. But you're probably in a long line of people who are interested to work with them. So they either will not respond or they will say yes and might not have the time to put in the work at the end of the day. So find other people who could be also early career researchers like yourself, who also have a vested interest in getting work out, and then try to work together to move your projects and get them to the right quality quicker, and then they can get published as well. If you do find people that are high flying, then make sure that they are developmental in terms of their approach and engagement with you, that they try to work with you to build you up so that you get the skills and confidence to be able to do work independently in the future. So it can be nice to get someone who's willing to take over a manuscript and change it very quickly. But if you don't understand the processes involved, then you will always be dependent. And that's not a winning proposition in the long term. So be prepared that sometimes you will work with the wrong people. That's a natural part of the process that teaches you who to avoid and how to go about finding the right partners. Finally, I think it's important that you always think long-term. It doesn't matter what the current pressures are, but think about what this means for you going forward and into the future. So you touched upon AI in your question and how it's creating pressure for people to publish more because some people are using it and they are highly successful in terms of getting work out. One of the things that I think is going to happen, it is already happening, is that there's going to be a crackdown on this type of research. And if you have decent work that you put in an obscure journal that probably did accept a lot of these AI-generated manuscripts, when that journal goes out, your genuine work will also go down with that journal. So be very careful about the balance between short-term pressures and long-term implications. And I would say whatever you do, however difficult it is, do not compromise yourself when it comes to the authenticity of your work, in terms of producing rigorous work and being patient with the review process. I think it is broken. I think it takes longer than it generally should, but it also does serve a fundamentally good purpose. And you're going to have to, for some part, trust the process. So on the quality versus quantity question in academic publishing, especially in the postdoc phase, The things to note are that, yes, it is true there are issues in academia where there's a misalignment between the incentives to publish and the need for high quality work. The question is how you navigate this challenge. And maybe a question for the field is how they are going to change this, because it's not a sustainable model. In the meantime, here are the things that you can do to make your life easier when it comes to dealing with these types of issues. So always think mobility. Do not get lost in the requirements of the current job and the demands of the present institution. So find out in your field what is valued more and try to make sure that you tick those boxes so that you open up your options and you're able to move on to other places that might be better aligned with your own ambitions and goals and values when it comes to that question of quality versus quantity. Also find institutional allies. Make sure that there are people who are aware of the work that you're putting in and who understand how long the process is to get out good quality work. And I also say, make sure that those allies don't look like you in the sense that they have certain advantages that you wouldn't have. You don't want an ally who's stuck in the same boat as you when it comes to the challenges that you face, but you want someone who will speak for you in a different platform, in a different room, so that you are able to secure your interest in this regard. Make sure that you develop a pipeline. Start thinking from the master's phase to the PhD phase. What kind of work do you have that could potentially be published? And then develop a system for how you will work on it. Have some main papers that you currently work on. Have some back burner papers that you pick up once in a while. And then have some papers in the parking lot that you will pick up at the first available opportunity. And then also make sure that you know what the low-hanging fruit is and try to get that out as quickly as possible. Collaborate a lot. Collaborate with people who have similar interests as you, so they're eager to get good work out in a decent amount of time. And most times they will be early career researchers like yourself. If you're going to pick more senior people to work with, then make sure they're developmental in their approach and they're helping you to become an independent researcher. And finally, whatever you do, always think about the long term. So do not compromise any long-term objectives in order to satisfy short-term pressure.